The execution chamber hummed with deadly energy as the Galactic Council prepared to terminate Specimen XK-47. The massive room stretched across 3 levels, filled with representatives from every corner of the galaxy. Above them, holographic displays showed the creature's biological data in stark red warnings. Temperature readings, venom toxicity levels, neural activity, all painting the picture a living weapon. The juvenile Vexhi writhed in its containment field, no bigger than a human teenager, but infinitely more dangerous. Its crystalline scales caught the harsh chamber lighting, pulsing with bioluminescent warning patterns that made several alien diplomats step back instinctively. The creature's 6 eyes darted around the room, showing what looked like pure terror to anyone willing to look closely enough. Every diplomat present had lost someone to Vexhi venom. The Zentari had lost an entire colony ship to a single adult Vexhi that had somehow gotten aboard. The Corvani still mourned their exploration team that had made first contact with the species 50 years ago. None of them had survived longer than 30 seconds after the encounter. The creature's home planet was gone now, consumed by a cosmic storm that had torn through the system 6 months ago. This was the last of its kind, found drifting in an escape pod by a Galactic Council patrol ship. The debate over what to do with it had raged for weeks. Some wanted to study it. Others demanded immediate termination. In the end, fear won out over science. Captain Tom Bradley of the human delegation sat in the back row, watching proceedings with growing unease. Humans were still the newest members of the council, having joined only 15 years ago. They rarely spoke during these sessions, still learning the complex web of galactic politics. But something about the situation made Tom's stomach turn. The execution device powered up with a low whine. The containment field began to shift, preparing to deliver a focused energy beam that would vaporize the creature instantly. Tom watched the young Vexhi press itself against the far edge of its prison, making small chittering sounds that the universal translator couldn't decode. That's when Tom realized what those sounds reminded him of. His own daughter, Katie, used to make similar noises when she had nightmares, small whimpers of fear that would wake him from the deepest sleep. She was grown now, serving on a research vessel near the Andromeda Relay, but he remembered those sounds perfectly. The creature wasn't posturing or threatening. It was crying. Captain Tom Bradley of the human delegation stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the metal floor. The sound echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. I formally request custody of the creature under Article 7 of the Sentient Rights Accord. The chamber fell silent. 3,000 beings from across the galaxy turned to stare at the human who had just volunteered for what they all considered suicide. The execution device powered down automatically as Council protocol kicked in. All termination orders were suspended pending formal requests for custody. Ambassador Krell of the Zentari Republic was first to speak, his scale face twisted in what humans had learned to recognize as disbelief. His people had been among the first to encounter the Vexhi, and they had never forgotten the horror. Captain Bradley, that thing will kill you before you reach your ship. We have documented evidence of Vexhi venom dissolving starship hulls in under a minute. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The Thurian delegate activated her translator, speaking in rapid bursts to her staff. The Corvani representative shook his massive head slowly, like he was watching someone walk off a cliff. In the viewing galleries, alien reporters began recording frantically, sensing that history was being made. Tom's jaw set firmly. He had spent his whole career in the military, fighting in conflicts across human space. He had seen enough death to last 10 lifetimes. But he had also raised a daughter, and he knew the difference between a monster and a frightened child. That thing is a child, and children deserve better than execution. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates argued in dozens of languages, while their translators struggled to keep up. Some called Tom insane. Others accused humans of having a death wish. A few wondered if this was some kind of elaborate military strategy that they couldn't understand. Through it all, the young Vexhi remained perfectly still in its containment field, watching the strange bipedal creature who had just offered to die for someone he had never met. Its bioluminescent patterns shifted from warning red to something softer, a pale blue that flickered like hope trying to take hold in the darkness. Tom Bradley stood his ground, knowing that every eye in the galaxy was now on humanity, waiting to see if their newest members were brave or simply stupid beyond measure. The council voted 847 to 1 to grant the human request, convinced they were witnessing an elaborate suicide. The single vote against came from the human delegation itself. Tom's own deputy had tried to stop what he saw as career-ending madness. But galactic law was clear, and within an hour, Tom found himself walking to the corridors of the council station with a sedated alien predator in his arms. The creature was heavier than he expected. Its crystalline scales warmed to the touch despite the cooling systems in its temporary transport container. Security guards from 6 different species escorted them, weapons drawn and ready. None of them looked at Tom directly. They were too busy watching for the first signs of movement from the Vex High. Every few steps, someone would mutter something in their native language that the translators refused to convert, probably curses about crazy humans. News of the transfer spread across the galactic network faster than lightspeed communication. Alien reporters swarmed the docking bay, held back by a thin line of station security. Camera drones buzzed overhead like mechanical insects, broadcasting live feeds to billions of viewers across thousands of worlds. The Zentari Broadcasting Network had already started a countdown timer in the corner of their screens. Human Death Watch. Day 1, Hour 0. As Tom carried the sedated Vex High aboard the transport Endeavor, alien news networks began broadcasting countdown timers, betting on survival. The odds weren't good. Most bookmakers gave him less than 6 hours. The generous ones stretched it to a full day. Not a single major betting house gave him odds of surviving a week. Dr. Rachel Connor, the ship's xenobiologist, met them at the airlock. Her face was pale, and her hand shook slightly as she ran her medical scanner over the creature. She had studied every available file on Vex High biology during the 3-hour flight from Earth space, and none of it made her feel better about having one aboard their ship. "Tom, are you completely insane?" she whispered, trying not to wake the creature. "Its venom sacs are fully developed. Look at these readings. It could kill our entire crew with a single defensive spray. The toxin breaks down cellular walls at the molecular level. There's no antidote, no treatment, nothing." Tom looked down at the creature in his arms, noting how its breathing had steadied during the transport, away from the harsh lights and cold metal of the execution chamber. Almost looked peaceful. "So were my daughter's teeth when she was teething," he replied, settling the creature into a hastily modified cargo bay. "Didn't stop us from loving her." Rachel stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. But Tom had spent 30 years in the military, and he'd learned to trust his instincts. Something about this whole situation felt wrong. The galaxy was so quick to execute what might be the last member of an entire species, all because of fear. The cargo bay had been converted into something resembling a habitat in just 3 hours. The engineering crew had worked miracles, installing atmospheric processors, temperature controls, and basic amenities. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than an execution chamber. Soft blue lighting replaced the harsh white glare of the council station. The constant hum of the ship's engines provided a steady, comforting background noise. The alien they decided to name Flint slowly awakened to soft lighting and the gentle hum of human machinery, a stark contrast to the sterile execution chamber. Tom watched from behind reinforced transparent aluminum as the creature's 6 eyes opened one by one, pupils adjusting to the dim light. For a long moment, Flint didn't move, probably expecting another round of tests or torture. Instead, he found himself in something that almost felt like home. The blue lighting reminded him of the bioluminescent caves on his destroyed homeworld. The steady humming was similar to the sound the great machines had made in the deep places where his people had lived. It wasn't home, but wasn't the cold, clinical nightmare of the past 6 months either. Across the ship, crew members gathered around monitors, watching the first live footage of Vex High in captivity that didn't end in death. Chief Engineer Pat Murphy shook his head as he watched Flint explore his new environment. "Captain's either a genius or the biggest fool in human space," he muttered to his assistant. Meanwhile, the galactic media was having a field day. Talk show hosts debated human psychology. Military analysts tried to figure out if this was some new Earth strategy they didn't understand. Xenobiologists appeared on news programs to explain, in graphic detail, exactly how Vex-High Venom would kill Captain Bradley when the inevitable happened. The betting pools grew larger by the hour. Some aliens placed wagers on exactly how long Tom would survive. Others bet on whether any of his crew would make it out alive. A few optimistic souls even placed long-shot bets on the humans somehow succeeding, though the odds were astronomical. Nobody in the galaxy believed that love could tame a monster. They were about to learn something new about humanity. Lieutenant Jake Morrison brought Flynn his first meal on a simple metal tray. Nothing fancy or intimidating. The synthetic proteins had been carefully arranged to mimic the small creatures that Vex-High typically hunted on their homeworld, based on the limited data they had from old exploration reports. The smell was probably all wrong, and the texture definitely wasn't right, but it was the best the ship's food processors could manage. Flint pressed himself against the far wall of his enclosure when Jake approached, his crystalline scales shifting to deep red warning patterns. Every muscle in his body was tense, ready to strike or flee. On his homeworld, food had always come with a price: submission, pain, or worse. The council station had been no different. Meals arrived with electric prods and restraining fields, making sure he understood his place as a specimen rather than a living being. Jake noticed the fear immediately and stopped several feet away from the feeding slot. Instead of pushing the tray through and leaving like a normal person would, he did something that made no sense to alien observers watching through security feeds. He sat down cross-legged on the cold metal floor, holding the tray in his lap like he had all the time in the world. "Easy there, buddy. Nobody's going to hurt you," Jake said in the same tone he used with his sister's rescue dogs back on Earth. "I know this place is scary and strange, but you're safe now. I promise." The universal translator struggled with Jake's casual tone, converting his words into formal galactic standard that missed most of the warmth. But somehow, Flint seemed to understand anyway. Maybe it was something in Jake's voice, or the way he kept his movements slow and predictable. The red warning patterns on Flint's scales gradually shifted to amber, then to a cautious yellow-green. It took 20 minutes before Flint worked up the courage to approach the feeding slot. Jake slid the tray through with movements so gentle they barely made a sound. Then he settled back against the wall and started talking about random things: the weather on Earth, his favorite movies, how his nephew had just learned to ride a bicycle. Nothing important, just the kind of rambling conversation that fills comfortable silences. Flynn ate carefully, never taking his eyes off Jake. Every few bites, he would pause and tilt his head, listening to the steady stream of human chatter. The food tasted wrong, but it was warm and filling, and for the first time in months, no one was hurting him while he ate. Days turned to weeks, and something remarkable began to happen. The daily feeding routine became the foundation for something unprecedented in galactic history: a friendship between human and Vex-High. Jake started bringing books, reading aloud from children's stories and adventure novels. Flint would curl up near the transparent barrier, his bioluminescent patterns shifting in what seemed like response to the emotional beats of the stories. Dr. Rachel Connor documented everything, filling report after report with observations that contradicted everything the galaxy thought it knew about Vex-High behavior. Flint learned human gestures within days, mimicking Jake's waves, and had nods with remarkable accuracy. When crew members walked past his enclosure, he started making small chirping sounds that seemed distinctly friendly rather than threatening. The breakthrough came when Engineering Chief Bob Eachin brought his daughter's old puzzle games to the ship. Katie had outgrown them years ago, but Bobby thought they might help keep Flint mentally stimulated. Within hours, Flint was solving problems that stumped some junior crew members, his 6 eyes tracking patterns and connections with obvious delight. Flint played simple games with the crew through the barrier, matching colors, responding to musical tones, even what looked like a primitive version of Peekaboo that had the night shift in stitches. He began responding to his name with enthusiasm, his scales brightening whenever someone called out to him. The venom spines that had terrified the galaxy remained carefully retracted during these interactions, extended only during sleep, when his natural defenses took over. The real test came during a routine maintenance cycle. Engineer Kate Stevens was replacing a faulty power coupling near Flint's enclosure when her plasma cutter slipped, slicing deep into her palm. She cried out and dropped the tool, blood spattering across the deck plating. Flint's reaction shocked everyone watching security feeds. Instead of showing excitement at the scent of blood like a predator should, he whimpered, an unmistakably distressed sound that needed no translation. He pressed against the barrier closest to Kate, his scales cycling through concerned blue patterns, and tried to offer comfort in the only way he knew how. His venom spines, those deadly weapons that could kill with a touch, retracted so completely that they disappeared beneath his scales entirely. Kate looked up from her injured hand to find Flint watching her with what could only be described as worry. "Hey there, little guy," she whispered, wrapping her hand in emergency bandages. "I'm okay. Thanks for caring." Galactic observers were baffled. The Death Watch that had started as morbid entertainment became a fascinated study as humans treated the galaxy's most feared predator like any other orphan child. Xenopsychologists scrambled to rewrite their theories about Vex-High behavior. Military strategists wondered if humans had discovered some new form of psychological warfare. Parents across the galaxy watched their children follow the daily broadcasts with growing interest. What they were witnessing was something simpler and more revolutionary than anyone imagined: the power of treating someone with kindness instead of fear. The crisis came when Void Runners attacked mining station Prometheus during what should have been a routine supply run. The Endeavor had docked only hours earlier to deliver medical supplies to the remote mining facility. Tom Bradley was still in meetings with the station administrator when the alarm started screaming through the corridors. Flint, now wearing a modified crew uniform that Jake had designed for him, was in the observation lounge with several human families who were waiting for transport to the outer colonies. The uniform was more than just clothing. It was a symbol that he belonged somewhere, that he was part of something bigger than himself. The fabric was specially woven to accommodate his crystalline scales and retractable spines, dyed in the same navy blue as the rest of the crew. The first explosion shook the entire station. Through the massive viewing windows, everyone could see the sleek black ships of the Void Runners surrounding Prometheus, like predators circling wounded prey. These weren't ordinary pirates. They were the worst kind of criminals, slavers who specialized in capturing colonists for the illegal labor markets in the Outer Rim. Flint watched human families huddle in terror as the pirates breached the station's outer hull. Children cried while their parents tried to shield them with their own bodies. An elderly woman clutched a photograph of her grandchildren. A young father whispered reassurances to his infant daughter while his hands shook with fear. These weren't soldiers or security personnel. They were innocent people who had never expected to face anything worse than equipment failures or asteroid storms. The station's security force was overwhelmed within minutes. Captain David Ross of station security sent out desperate calls for help, but the nearest military patrol was hours away. The Void Runners moved through the station with brutal efficiency, herding civilians toward the docking bays where their slave ships waited. Flynn had never seen humans look so helpless before. For months, the crew of the Endeavor had shown him nothing but kindness and strength. Jake had taught him games and read him stories. Dr. Rachel Connor had patiently helped him learn to communicate. Tom Bradley had risked everything just to give him a chance at life. Now these same people, or people just like them, were in danger, and there was nothing any of them could do about it. That's when something shifted inside Flint. The training sessions with the crew hadn't just been about controlling his venom or learning human customs. They had been about choosing who he wanted to be. The Void Runner saw these humans as prey, but Flint saw them as family. Without hesitation, Flint slipped away from the observation lounge while the adults were focused on the approaching pirates. His small size and natural stealth abilities, combined with months of exploring every inch of human ships, made him nearly invisible as he moved through the station's maintenance areas. He had watched Jake repair ventilation systems dozens of times, and he knew that most humanoid species couldn't fit through spaces that were perfectly sized for a juvenile Vex-High. The ventilation system became his highway through the station. His crystalline scales shifted to match the metallic surfaces around him, making him almost impossible to spot even if someone looked directly at him. He could hear the pirates below, shouting orders and threatening civilians, but they had no idea that death was crawling to the walls above their heads. His venom, precisely controlled through months of human guidance and patient training, became a surgical weapon instead of an instrument of mass destruction. Flynn had learned to modulate the toxin production in his spines, something that Vex-High and the Wild never needed to do. The pirates expected resistance from security forces, not from the ceiling itself. The first pirate went down silently, paralyzed by a single precisely placed spine that delivered just enough venom to shut down his nervous system without killing him. Then another and another. Flint moved like a ghost through the station, disabling attackers with the patience of a hunter and precision of a surgeon. His venom disabled 17 pirates in non-lethal doses. Enough to paralyze but not kill. Every shot was calculated. Every dose measured to stop rather than eliminate. He saved 300 lives that day, but the image that went viral across every galactic network was much simpler than that. Captain David Ross of Station Security found Flint in a maintenance closet, curled protectively around a human child who couldn't have been more than 4 years old. The little girl had somehow gotten separated from her parents during the chaos, and Flint had found her crying in the dark. The child was fast asleep in Flint's arms, her small hand clutching one of his retracted spines like it was a favorite toy. Flint's scales glowed with soft, comforting blue light, the same pattern he used when Jake read him bedtime stories. The scene looked like something from a children's book rather than the aftermath of a violent pirate attack. The monster became the hero, Captain Ross reported to the galactic media, his voice filled with wonder. But I don't think he was ever really a monster at all. We just never bothered to look close enough to see what he really was. The image of Flint protecting that sleeping child changed everything. Across the galaxy, beings who had spent their lives fearing the Vex-High began to see something different. Not a weapon of mass destruction, but a person capable of love, sacrifice, and heroism. 6 months later, the Terran Defense Academy's graduation hall buzzed with nervous energy as beings from across the galaxy gathered for an unprecedented ceremony. The massive auditorium had been specially modified to accommodate 47 different species, each with their own atmospheric and seating requirements. Translators worked overtime as diplomats whispered in dozens of languages, all try to process what they were about to witness. Flint stood in the wings, adjusting his formal dress uniform one last time. The fabric still felt strange against the scales, but it carried weight now. The weight of responsibility, of belonging, of becoming something more than anyone had ever imagined possible. His crystalline scales shifted through nervous patterns, cycling from deep blue to pale green as he waited for his cue. The graduation ceremony had drawn more media attention than any single event in galactic history. News crews from every major network crowded the press gallery, their cameras focused on the empty podium where history would be made. Betting pools that had once focused on Flint's survival now centered on whether he would actually make it through the oath of service without someone trying to stop the ceremony. Ambassador Helen Cooper of the human delegation stepped up to the podium, carrying a small wooden box that contained something no one had ever thought they would see, a badge of galactic law enforcement designed specifically for Vex-High. The badge itself was a work of art, crafted by the finest smiths on 3 different worlds. It incorporated traditional human symbols of justice with design elements from Flint's lost homeworld, a bridge between 2 very different cultures. The assembled crowd fell silent as Flint walked onto the stage. He moved with the fluid grace that had once terrified the galaxy, but now his every step spoke of control and purpose rather than predatory instinct. Behind him walked Tom Bradley, no longer just a ship's captain, but now director of the newly formed interspecies adoption program. The man who had risked everything to save one frightened child had become the architect of galactic social reform. Representatives from 47 species watched in amazement as Ambassador Cooper presented Flint with his badge. The moment was broadcast live across every inhabited system, reaching an estimated 12 billion viewers. Children pressed against screens on hundreds of worlds, watching as their parents tried to explain how the universe had changed while they weren't paying attention. "Officer Flint," Cooper said, her voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's advanced sound system, "do you swear to uphold the laws of the Galactic Council, to protect those who cannot protect themselves, and to serve justice with honor and compassion?" Flint's response came through his personal translator, but his voice needed no technological assistance to convey the emotion behind the words. "I swear to protect the innocent, to serve justice, and to prove that redemption is possible for anyone willing to choose a better path." The applause that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever heard. It started with a human delegation, but quickly spread through the entire auditorium as species that had feared each other for generations found themselves united in witnessing something truly revolutionary. The ceremony was just the beginning. The Bradley Protocol had been established 3 months earlier, after heated debates in the council chambers that lasted for weeks. The new law was simple in concept but revolutionary in practice. No sentient being would face execution for the crimes of their species. Every individual deserved the chance to choose their own path, regardless of their biology or the actions of their ancestors. Hundreds of irredeemable alien children found homes with human families across the galaxy within the first year. The Shrakti twins, whose species was known for their telepathic mind control abilities, were adopted by the Johnson family on New Terra. Little Zeph, a young Krillian whose natural acid production had made his species feared as living weapons, found a home with retired teacher Patricia Wells on the farming colony of Haven's Rest. Each success story inspired others. The Mendez family took an Athorkin child whose species had been banned from most civilized worlds after their homeworld attempt at galactic conquest. The Roberts clan adopted 3 siblings from the Vashti Collective, whose hive mind abilities had made other species classify them as a security threat. As Flint took his oath of service, his venom gland safely sealed except in emergencies through a revolutionary medical procedure developed specifically for his new role, the Galactic Council prepared to vote on a proposal that would have been unthinkable just a year earlier. The Universal Compassion Accord would mandate that all member species consider rehabilitation and adoption programs before resorting to imprisonment or exile for young offenders. The session was recorded for the Galactic Archives, but the final statement came not from any official document or legal proceeding. It came from Council Speaker Thrix of the Altarian Republic, whose own people had once been enslaved by the Vashti Collective. Where humans see monsters, they choose to see family. Perhaps it is time we all learn to see as humans do. The transformation wasn't complete overnight. There were setbacks, protests, and political battles that lasted for years. But the seed had been planted, and it grew in ways that surprised everyone. The galaxy learned that compassion wasn't weakness. It was a foundation of true strength. The day humans adopted a monster, they taught the galaxy the true meaning of compassion. More importantly, they proved that sometimes the greatest heroes come from the most unexpected places, and that love really can conquer fear if people are brave enough to try.